Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Tom Worth Jr. Wanted to talk a little bit about Vladimir Putin's mastery of Trump and how the entire grand strategy of the United States for the last, since post-World War II, for the last 80 years or so, has been upended by Donald Trump and masterminded by Vladimir Putin. Been keeping our eyes on the Munich Security Conference this weekend and going back to Thursday before it started. This is for, discussing the security of Europe, discussing NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. For those of you who may have forgotten what NATO even stands for, North Atlantic, that would include the United States on this side, and Europe on the other. It was created to fend off Soviet and communist expansion after World War II, and it's been extraordinarily effective. And we actually defeated the Soviet Union in the Cold War. It disbanded. You were left with Russia, and then former Soviet satellite states. And Putin was the KGB agent, not like a high-ranking person through most of his career, but came to power. People had high hopes for him, and he's just turned into the worst. And Europe is still there. Europe is still on the doorstep of Russian expansion plans. And we all know Putin will not stop with Ukraine. The existential threat to the Soviet Union and now to Russia has always and only been the existence of the United States. And that's really the reason why Russia, the Soviets before, and now once Germany was defeated, that is, after World War II, Germany was always the big threat to Russia after Napoleon was. But without the United States being a threat to Russia, Russia doesn't have to worry about that anymore. They can just focus on their own expansion. And that's exactly what Trump has been allowing Putin to dream about. And we still don't know why Trump is doing all of this, but he is forsaking our alliance with Europe itself. And he sent J.D. Vance over there to deliver stunning remarks to this gathering of Europeans over in Munich. And it was mind-boggling, the words that were coming out of J.D. Vance's mouth at the behest of Donald Trump's team. Europe is not taking this lying down, nor is Zelensky. They have quickly regathered and refocused to what may be a post-United States defense umbrella world for them. I still think that once the Democratic Congress comes in a year and 9 months, and then hopefully a Democrat president 2 years later, that we would reverse course, but that's almost 4 years from now before that administration would take over. And Europe can't wait 4 years to see what Russia's going to do. I watched the entire speech of Zelensky to the conference. I watched it this morning, about 25 minutes long, and I encourage you all to do that. Just find it on YouTube, Zelensky's speech at the Munich Security Conference today. That guy gets it, and Europeans love him, and they are on the front line against Russian aggression. And he correctly points out that if the Ukrainians fall, then where does the Russian war machine go next? Because they have hundreds of thousands, probably over 1 million standing troops in their army, and they'll just be hanging out with nothing to do. Russia doesn't really have a functional economy, so that's why that's why I call them a kleptocracy. That's what they are. They exist by stealing the resources of others. And that would be the plan. Who's next to fall? Whose resources can they capture next? Ukraine has immense natural resources, and if that were all to go into Putin's pocket, then he would have even more to put into the war machine. And it's crazy because we put this to bed after World War II, we thought. The agreement was that the United States would provide the security umbrella over Europe so European countries wouldn't fight each other all the time. Because without an external guarantor of the peace, they would always be fearful of each other, whether it's France and Germany, or Germany and Poland, or Germany and England. And they're all just looking at each other. It's like if Arkansas and Texas and Missouri and Kansas just didn't trust each other at all, because they all spoke different languages and they all had different cultural heritages, and they were all just amassing their troops and their weaponry on their state borders with each other. Then you have someone come in and say, look, you all agree to not arm up and to not spend a bunch of your GDP on your militaries, and we will just ensure that nobody's attacking anyone else. That's the agreement we've had with Europe. And that is what Putin has always worked to upend, and he is accomplishing that through Donald Trump. Donald Trump is doing what 80 years of Soviet and Russian military prowess and expenditure could not do. And he is systematically breaking down the defense of Europe. Is Putin going to roll into Europe? Like I said, they're not rolling into Paris yet. They're not going to roll into London yet. They'll start nibbling off edges. Whatever Trump does here, he says it's to save a buck. Whatever he does here is going to result in losses. It's going to result in the loss of Ukraine. It's going to result in losses in Europe. It's going to result in the loss of the European market for American goods. And we may never get that back. And if we do, it will come at great expense. And this is what Trump has never understood. His brain is just so simple, so infantile. He can't grasp that you have to maintain relationships and investments for the future. They're not for today. They're not for somebody owes us something for last week. They are you're spending money and resources today to keep from having to spend exponentially more tomorrow or next year or next decade. This is what Xi Jinping has always understood. This is what Vladimir Putin understands. Donald Trump cannot understand this, and his people do not understand this. So where does that leave us? Well, Zelensky's impassioned plea to Europe was for Europe to stand together with each other and to not forget that Ukraine is part of Europe. It's not part of Russia. It's not part of a Soviet Union. It's not part of Eurasia. It's part of Europe. And they need to act like it. And even if Donald Trump or J.D. Vance or anyone else says that Ukraine cannot be part of NATO, Ukraine itself is not accepting that, nor should Europe. And if the United States is voluntarily walking away from NATO, walking away from Europe as a market, as a strategic defense organization, then what do they need the United States for if they're not going to help out with their defense or with their economy or with anything else? Why do they need to do whatever the United States commands? Now, he's not saying that NATO needs to just keep existing and kick the United States out. He's not saying that at all. He is saying, again, rightfully so, the United States is the security umbrella of Europe as things currently stand. But he sees the writing on the wall, as do all the European leaders in NATO, that Donald Trump is doing everything he can to dismantle that. And this is at Putin's bidding. And This is why all we know is that Putin has phone calls with Donald Trump. And his phone calls with Donald Trump that no one else can listen in on are more effective than the Soviet nuclear arsenal ever was, or that Soviet tanks ever were, or that 10 years in Afghanistan for the Soviet Union was. Just phone calls to Donald Trump is getting the United States to not be the United States anymore. This is very disturbing, but you have to look at Europe. Europe is so powerful economically and manpower wise and intelligence wise and study wise. They are going to figure this out, and they have to figure this out now, because J.D. Vance came in there and lectured them like a bunch of school children. And if there's one thing anyone hates, it's to be lectured to by people that aren't as intelligent as you, aren't as experienced as you, aren't as big picture as you. Nobody likes to be lectured by people like that. And you throw in it that it is all European leaders and J.D. Vance doing the lecturing, that did not go over. That fell very flat, and the rousing ovations that Zelensky got today throughout his speech, they realize he is on the front line. And if that front line falls, then Europe itself, outside of Ukraine, will then become the front line. They are not being delusional about this. They now know that the United States is abandoning them, and they are doing so in favor of Vladimir Putin. And there's nothing that the United States Congress will do about this. This is not a thing that judges can do anything about either. Federal judges, the Supreme Court. Donald Trump unilaterally withdrawing from European relationships, I don't, not to my knowledge, I don't see how a federal judge can stop that. So this is up to Europe themselves, and I do believe that they are up to the task. And what this is going to result in is a stronger Europe. That's great, but not as much of a partner for the United States. And it will be a great loss to the United States. You think of everything that comes from Europe. I'm not going to list them out. There's too many. It is much of our way of life. Just not being there anymore, or being way more expensive than it ever was. There's just a lot at risk here. Not to mention Vladimir Putin's domination of Europe itself once Ukraine falls. I'm not so sure Ukraine's going to fall, even without United States assistance. I do think that Europe is up to the challenge, but notice has been served. Vladimir Putin served Europe notice through the mouthpiece of J.D. Vance that Europe is no ally to the United States anymore. And that is the reality. And the right people are recognizing that reality over the last few days. And I'm glad they are. We will stay tuned to all of this. And I hope you all have a great day today on Saturday. And we will talk tomorrow.